video, I'm gonna go over what I believe is the simplest way to increase your Etsy listings conversion rate without going out and spending a bunch of money on sourcing more raw materials or product development or photography. None of that at all, just a simple way to add more value into your existing listings. So let's get into it. So while having beautiful imagery and photography in your Etsy listings is just a given, how can we add more value on what's already there? In other words, how do we sell the product better? And like I mentioned, having beautiful imagery and beautiful photography and videography should already be the standard, meaning you have fully optimized images, cohesive images that look good and make sense together, as well as a video. So on top of that, assuming that those are already optimized, what else can we do? Believe it or not, you have a place on your Etsy listing called a product description. And unfortunately, believe it or not, there are very few people that go down there and actually read that description. But that description usually, or should, include a lot of really valuable selling points, key selling points actually. Not only key selling points, but a lot of times in your description, you actually overcome objections that people may have to the product or making that purchasing decision. What we can do is almost force people or force viewers to read those key selling points or read those objections by including those in as infographics in your product imagery. So how are we gonna do that? If you go to Amazon.com right now, you will see that having infographics is really just like a standard on Amazon. And here's a listing on Amazon that actually does it really, really well. I will say on Amazon, it is more common for the imagery to be 3D rendered, like we saw in this example here on Amazon. It's with like a simple white background, very 3D rendered. We have some lifestyle, but even here you can see that that pillow is 100% photoshopped in there. That is not actually sitting on that couch. On Etsy, that doesn't really convert the best. I'm not saying that listings like this couldn't make sales on Etsy, but normally Etsy want to have a more human touch to it, a more human feel. So with that being said, we can still use a valuable teaching from Amazon, but figure out how to incorporate that on Etsy, but with more lifestyle imagery and not so photoshopped infographics. Let's talk about the do's and don'ts of how to do this properly. So number one is having an infographic that's too wordy, like you literally taking the description and trying to put a paragraph into an infographic. That would just cause overwhelm. So we want to get creative with our copywriting and really figure out what are the core sentences or the core phrases in our descriptions that are key selling points that we can include inside of our Etsy listings. One place that sparks a lot of really good creative ideas is Canva. So if I come into Canva right now and I just type in product listing, a lot of these are 3D rendered, but they give you some good examples of what an infographic could look like. This looks pretty 3D rendered, but say you had this, but next to an actual real image of your soap bottles if you were selling soap or something like that. But it lists the core benefits here. So we're not writing out big long paragraphs or sentences, right? We really just want them to quick glance and see core benefits or overcoming core objections. Number two don't is having incohesive infographics. Similarly to just your imagery. If you have a really beautiful main image, but the images that follow aren't really cohesive or unprofessional in comparison to the first image, you actually can do the opposite effect and decrease your conversion rate by scaring people away. Incohesive branding is actually a sign of less valuable products, and so we don't want to have a great main image, earn that click, and then waste that click or spend money on that click and then scare people away with what follows. So we want to make sure that our imagery and the following infographics are super, super cohesive. In Canva, luckily because Canva does a great job of this, Canva has a lot of brand guides that, well, one kind of builds it for you, but also kind of walks you through the steps of what fonts look good together, what color schemes look good together, so on and so forth. Kind of the rule of thumb with imagery and infographics is that, whatever, main color schemes or color tones you're using, we want to make sure that we put infographics in those images or videos that they make sense and look good together. And of course, if you've never even done that before, you can always come up to Canva in the search bar and type in brand mood board. You can get an idea of what a mood board is for your brand if you've never built one. Canva is like Photoshop branding for beginners. I mean, this is where I pretty much have learned everything. And there's a whole bunch of templates in here that you can learn off of and grow off of if it works for what you have in mind for your brand. Number 3 for another big don't is that you don't want to have anything potentially hazardous or confusing between your drop-down menus and your infographic. I found a really good example of this listing here. We see this really, really beautiful best-selling listing here, and when you click on that baby hat listing, you then see this beautiful image, and then when you scroll through here, you have a bunch of different options. And this is very common. The nature of selling on Etsy is that a lot of times you can customize between the materials and the colors in a million different ways, and that's awesome, but we also don't want to over allow customization or have too many offerings where it almost makes your drop-down menus confusing. While this is still a bestseller and it has 4 people bought this in the last 24 hours, I'm not saying that what they're doing isn't working. There's just room for optimization. By fixing this, it actually probably really helped them, because I can guarantee there is a drop-off because there's a bit of confusion when it comes to this listing. For instance, when you're just scrolling through the images here, you see awesome, there's a whole bunch of different colors. And then you get to this image here that offers these 3 different colors, which seem like they're included here, but there's a little bit of confusion. We see biscotti color here, and then we also see biscotti color here, but the 2 colors look very different, and you see a difference in font. Someone looking at this, first of all, might just be confused because maybe the different fonts means that it's something different, when maybe it's actually the same. I'm not really sure. We also have a color here that's white, and then you also have a color here that's called milk white. And then in the drop-down menu, you only have the color milk white. So which white actually is it? For some people, the persistent buyers, they might reach out and ask, but if you are confused and that customer is not super keen on taking massive action, you might have just lost that sale because there was a moment of confusion. So what does milk white mean in comparison to this white? Or are they saying that milk white and this white is actually the same, even though the image actually looks slightly different? Pure white and milk white, in my mind, is 2 different things. One is more of like a eggshell white versus like a pure bright white, like my light in front of me. So while these lifestyle images in themselves look really, really good and professional, we're causing a bit of confusion here. Now let's move on the do's when it comes to infographics. Do have a drop-down menu, and make sure that drop-down menu is synced with the variation options. Back to this example here, it's great that they have a drop-down menu with many options to buy, but when I click on biscotti here, it's not bringing me to the image that has the biscotti. When I click on rice here, it really just stays on the same image. So if I'm on this image and I click on any of these colors, it's not syncing to the actual image. Inside of your Etsy listings, you actually have the option to sync your images to your variation options. And this also just eliminates any guessing or any searching that the customer is gonna have to do on your behalf. All right, so here's an example of a print-on-demand sweater that I was just messing around with. This is not a real listing by any means, but for instance down here, if we come down here, we have our variation options. You have this option here to link photos. You can actually associate each variation option with its coordinated photo. And obviously in this baby example here, biscotti would technically bring it to this one. You know, all these colors would be associated with one image, and that's totally fine, but it's better that than them having to search for it by scrolling through the images. Another do, or another key thing that we just want to keep in mind, this doesn't really have to do with infographics, but just another key thing to note here, something actually a do not, so we'll just backtrack for a second. Do not show anything in the main image that you can't actually buy in the listing. So here, this is a great, this listing is doing great. It has 3 people bought this in the last 24 hours, but I can guarantee you that there is a good people clicking on this, assuming that they're getting all 3 of these items. But then when you come here, you realize that you can only change the finish and the size that you actually get. And while that might not be killing the listing entirely, if this person's running ads on this listing, I can guarantee you they're wasting money and they're wasting clicks because people are seeing 3 items in the main image and a necklace. We don't want to leave anything open to interpretation or confusion or distraction. Even in the main image against the search pages, you can see their necklace here. You can see 2 other earrings in the image. We really, really want just what's being sold to be the focal point of at least the main image. Otherwise, when you put ad money behind it, you may be wasting ad money on clicks and people leaving the listing because they don't actually getting in their mind what they saw in the main image. Another really big do that you can try out is split testing having different badges in the main image. One thing that we see that's pretty common is having like a free shipping badge or a ships next day badge. So here's an example of what I'm talking about, right? You have order by 2 p.m. CST, ships same day. So to improve this, if this hat is actually what they're selling, I would make that the center of the image, make sure that takes up more percentage of the actual image. Right now, the baby is the center focal point, and I really like his eyes. His eyes are really captivating, but I would just like to see the full hat and see him center in the image. And then I would also maybe make this not red, but maybe another tone of red that makes more sense to be next to these colors, which it kind of does work because you see the Christmas in the background. I don't totally hate it, but I would blow it up a little bit bigger and consider putting it at the bottom here a bit larger so you can actually see it. But again, doing badges in the main image, we just want to make sure that the badge still looks cohesive and looks nice compared to the image. I don't think this is horrible, but I would split test it a few different ways, especially make sure that the product is the center focal point of the image. And again, guys, everything is subject to test. If you run this, against a listing that doesn't have a badge and you see that the other one actually has a higher CTR, then maybe badges don't work particularly great for you and your niche, but you don't know until you try and you split test. And that is the beautiful thing about Etsy. You can split test everything. Other ideas for things for you to include in the infographics, not necessarily in the main image, are things like your care instructions. Other value propositions, like say you are super competitive on price. Like right now, if I go into Sales Samurai and I'm selling, what do we have in here? Baby beanies. Say one of the value propositions that you have is that you're super competitive on price. We can actually check the average sale price across the board for that keyword that you're trying to rank for. If you are, the main keyword you're going after is baby beanie. In Sales Samurai, it's showing me that the average price for that keyword is $17.77. Let's say that you're on average selling your beanies for 25% less. That could be a tagline in an infographic that says historically 25% cheaper than all Etsy sellers or something like that. Other ideas is that we use, say instead of just like regular cotton, maybe use organic recycled cotton. I don't know. All those key selling points that increase that perception of value that they otherwise would have to go search in your description for, whether it be on the amount of variation that they have, if you offer personalization, on the quality, on the different sizings that you offer, anything that you can help visually describe what's in that drop-down menu or in that value proposition. Again, it can't hurt, it can only add, unless of course you misbrand the infographics and they look not good, then yeah, that can hurt you. Another idea, especially because a lot of times what we tend to find is that there's only so many ways to photograph your product, especially if you're selling something standard like, candles or something. There's only so many different ways that you can photograph that candle. So you find sometimes that you don't have all those 10 photo slots filled. So other ideas to include there is maybe a picture of you making the product or you putting a face to the product, holding the candle yourself in your workshop. Another idea is showcasing your packaging. So if you have really beautiful packaging, that's a huge selling point, especially on Etsy. If you have really nice gift wrapping or packaging, take a picture of that and show people the whole experience. That also sets the expectation of what they're gonna get as well when they receive their order. Overall, guys, in my opinion, those are the easiest things that you can do without spending a bunch more money or investing more money in raw materials or investing time in doing more research and development. There's probably a lot of opportunity with your current listings just now on figuring out how to add more value in comparison to your competition, especially if a lot of your competitors aren't doing this. Again, it can't hurt. It can only add value if done properly. Overall, guys, my name is Hannah Gardner. If you have stayed until the end, comment down any of your tips or tricks down below if you have any value to add, because that is what this whole channel is about, is helping other entrepreneurs. If you have any little hacks or ideas, make sure you comment those down below, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye, guys.